This is John W. Golden, and I'd like to welcome you to my glass tile pendant and ring tutorial. For today's project, you're going to need a small graphic or piece of art, a clear glass tile, a silver-plated pendant tray, the always useful straightened out paper clip, and a bottle of Judican's DG3 art gel. Also helpful during this project would be small cups to cover the pieces while they dry, a 15/16 square punch, and a rack for your pieces to dry on. I use graphics that I produce. In this case, I'm using my Bird Collage series graphics. I'll switch back and forth between graphics, choosing basically the best footage to show you whichever part of the process I want you to learn about. First thing you got to do is punch your graphics out. Using a 15/16 punch, you basically want to line it up on your graphic. Try not to have any white showing on the edges. And it takes a little bit of hand strength with some of these larger punches, but once you have it lined up, a good squeeze will loosen that graphic up from the paper so that you can use it in your project. Three pieces that go into making the pendant are the pendant tray, the glass tile, and the graphic or artwork itself. Now, it's always a good idea to dry fit your pieces before you start using adhesive. You want to make sure that your artwork or graphic fits down inside the pendant and that you've got a pretty decently sized glass tile. These glass tiles are slightly smaller than the pendant that I use because that gives me a little more leeway in fixing it. First, we're going to put a good old dollop of DG3 in the base of the pendant tray. Tilt it around, try to get some good coverage. As you get better at doing this and estimating, you'll be able to just drop a dollop in there. You know how much you need, and just press your graphic down on top of it. But I always recommend when you're first starting out to actually kind of try to get it spread evenly in the base. Now that we have our base with the DG3 in the bottom of it, we're going to take our graphic and we're going to drop it down into the pendant tray. Basically try to get it glued down nicely using the DG3 in the tray. Be careful with your handy dandy paperclip because it will scratch some artwork. The graphics that I produce are water resistant and really don't need any kind of prep work or coating with Mod Podge when using DG3. They don't stand up as well to regular diamond glaze. Once you've got a nice little pool of DG3 in your base, you're going to take your glass tile and you really just want to try to float it on top of that little puddle of DG3. If you press down too hard, you'll create direct contact between the glass and the paper, and a lot of times you'll notice a difference in the texture. I try to keep a pretty, maybe an 1/8 inch thick layer if I can of DG3 between the glass and the paper, and I tend to get a much smoother result when I do that. The DG3 is going to probably come out some on the sides of the pendant, and that's easily cleaned up with a wet paper towel. Now your pendant is 90% done. You'll probably need to come back and fill some holes. As the DG3 dries, it tends to shrink and it'll leave gaps between the pendant and the glass, but that's easily fixed by just running a bead of DG3 around the outside edge of the pendant. Probably take 2 or 3 times to really get everything filled up and flush with the edge. Once you have filled the edges, at each time that you do it, cover your piece with a small cup to keep dust out of the DG3. Now the ring is slightly different from the pendant in that it doesn't have any sides to hold all that DG3 in, and it's also not having sides, it's open to the elements, as it were. So you really got to make sure you do a good job of covering everything that needs to be covered with DG3. The ring itself is a simple flat base. It's adjustable, and it's sized to fit the particular glass tiles that I use. Again, I use graphics that I create. These are done using a high-end inkjet printer. And once again, you have to have a punch. Now this particular punch is smaller than the one used before. I believe it's a 3/4 inch. Same process though. Basically you line it up there and you punch it through. You want to do a little dry run again. Make sure your graphic comes pretty close to covering the backside of the glass tile, though you do want a little bit of glass tile to show around the edge so that the DG3 can adhere to it. Put a good size, maybe pea-sized dollop of DG3 on the artwork, and then I like to press the glass down onto it. Again, I want to try to have a pretty good layer of DG3 between the graphic and the glass. It's not as easy with this design because the DG3 does tend to come out the sides, and you will have to continue to work with it. You want to make sure that your edges are down without squeezing too much of that DG3 out. Then your finished piece needs to be set aside to dry once you're happy with the placement. This is a piece that I finished earlier. It's dried a little bit and is ready to be used in the finished ring. I'm going to take my ring base, put another pea-sized dollop of DG3 on there, maybe a little more because it's better to have too much than too little. You want to spread the DG3 around with your paper clip, making sure you get a pretty good coating. It will fill some spaces if you do miss some little spots. Again, it is better to have a little extra DG3 because that increases the chances that you're going to fill things right up to the edges. You can see some DG3 coming off there. The glass graphic piece is going to want to float a little bit and drift on top of that puddle of DG3, so you want to sit with it a little while, babysit it, make sure that it's not turning or sliding off to the side. It doesn't take too long for the DG3 to set up a little bit. Then you put it in your rack to dry and check for holes, spots in the sides, and when you're done you have a nice little colorful ring. I hope you will enjoy trying them and keep your eye out for more tutorials from me. Thanks. Bye.
Pixel Noggin.